New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hello, my friends, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for Spiritual Toolkit today. My name is Brock Ford, and I am your host. Joining me on the team is producer Peter Millar, and a shout out to our network founder, Robert Brzezinski. The idea for my show came from my sincere desire to be of support and a voice for the disenfranchised, the struggling, and hurting people within my reach, and to offer spiritual and ethical practices that help others transform their lives, relationships, and careers. It's my hope that we can support others on their path to their passion, their dreams, and their best life, building a bridge of understanding, healing, and thriving for all. So we will have guests from all walks of life talking about real life and navigating its twists and turns and living triumphantly. And so last week I told you that we were going to go behind the scenes with the episode today and speak with our Spiritual Toolkit producer, Peter Millar. I've actually known Peter for 25 years. We met in San Francisco back when print publishing was still a real thing, y'all. We were working for different publishers and we met at a social function. We dated and eventually became partners personally and professionally, and even had our own special events publishing business for a while. We also co-parented a beautiful Chesapeake Bay Retriever doggie named Chessie, and in 2005, Peter and I broke up. But with time and effort, we managed to remain friends and stay connected like family. Peter studied film and television production at Northwestern University, and after college, he migrated into the world of print publishing, working to help produce textbooks, magazines, and all sorts of other printed materials, working on the creative writer, editor, and designer side of things. Peter has an interesting life with plenty of unexpected twists and turns over the years, and I suspect we'll talk a bit about that. But over the years, he and I have remained connected through it all. One of the reasons I wanted to have Peter as a guest today is because he's not a member of Unity, Religious Science, or any New Thought church for that matter, but he's worked with me, helping me to edit my messages, my sermons, and my workshops. He's helpful because he's so dadgum talented, especially because his mind is open to different spiritualities. He's pragmatic and analytical. So I know that if Peter likes a lesson or a workshop that I'm working on, I know it has a message that most people will understand and embrace. And so with that said, everyone, let's welcome Peter Millar to Spiritual Toolkit. Welcome, Peter.
Welcome.
Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So let's just get started. Let's just jump into this. And if you don't mind, let's go way back and give us some insight into your life growing up in Chicago and how you eventually migrated to San Francisco.
Sure. I born and raised in a suburb of Chicago named Park Ridge, Hillary Clinton's suburb. And it was a, middle class to slightly upper middle class kind of upbringing. My father was a doctor. My mom was a homemaker. I'm one of 7 children, second to youngest. And it, I think it was a fairly traditional suburban upbringing, considering that I was a child in the 60s and the 70s and, we still got to go and play outside, and our parents would send us out the door. Don't come back until the street lights come on, things like that, you know. And I stayed close to home when I went to college. I went to college at Northwestern, like you said, and that's in Evanston, which is another suburb of Chicago. And I guess the big thing is that, as you know, as you mentioned, we were partners. I'm gay. And I was raised in a pretty traditional, conservative sort of family way. So even though I had certain suspicions that I was gay from my earliest age that I can remember, it was totally not cool. It was totally something you couldn't talk about, you couldn't express, and it was shameful and all those kind of things. And I actually stayed in the closet up through my 20s. I graduated from college and I started working with these different print publishing places and all that. And when I was 29, my father became very ill and he passed away. And now when I say I was in the closet, I was deeply in denial. I wasn't having a secret life, doing things surreptitiously, or anything like that. All I was doing was trying to date women and making a lot of people, including myself, very unhappy. And when my father got sick and passed away, I saw him like in his hospital bed and in the ICU unit. And I just realized, I'm miserable. None of us are getting out of this alive. Get on with your life. And so I came out. I said, I know what is real and true for me. And it was a wonderful thing to be able to take that burden off of me and to live more authentically. I had a lot to learn as a 29-year-old who was just now coming out. In many ways, I think I was like still a high school student, 13, 14, 15-year-old when they first get their crushes and puppy love and stuff.
How did you come out? Did you come out to your family first?
Yeah, well, I'm very close to my brother Phil and his wife Jean. And Jean is a magnificent therapist, and she sees things. You know what I mean? She understands what's going on. And they created an environment for me that was really safe to say, hey, I think I am. And in fact, my entire family, when I came out, very supportive. The messages that I was raised with that said don't be gay went beyond just whether my family was more conservative or traditional or something. It was a very sociological thing. But my family was all really supportive, and working in the arts, in publishing with a lot of artists and graphic people, there were other people who were gay that I would cross paths with, and they saw me coming. You know what I mean? It was not a surprise to many people. Let's put it that way. As I talked to friends and all that. But as far as making it out to San Francisco, so it was odd waiting until I was 29, 30 to come out, because I had done so much to build a life that was built on a lie, that was inauthentic. And suddenly I'm coming out and I'm still seeing the same people and having the same relationships. And it felt very strange to me, because the whole world was different, but it was all the same at the same time. It's a difficult thing to explain. And it felt sort of inhibiting. It's like I wanted to run into my gay world and my gay life, but I had so many deep roots in this old sort of dishonest life that it was odd. It was fun the first couple of years, but it was odd. And I had given some thought to maybe there's a world beyond Chicago. Well, the other big seismic thing that happened in my life was I discovered just a couple of years later that I was HIV positive. And this was in the early 90s, when there were still not combination therapies and treatments that we knew were successful. In fact, I remember sitting in my doctor's office and being told I could expect to live healthily. I could expect good health for about 7 to 10 years. And then things will start to happen. And hopefully in 7 to 10 years, we'll have different kinds of treatments, better treatments than we have now. And that was just devastating. So from 29 to about 32, 33, a lot of big changes, and not all of them welcome, even though I still don't regret coming out or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I was really depressed at first. And a friend of mine who is an airline rep, he works for airline unions. He's like, you've got to snap out of this, go someplace fun. And he took me to San Francisco. And I had never been there before. And I realized I'm a Pacific Northwesterner trapped in the body of a Midwesterner. Once I got out to San Francisco, I'm like, just the terrain, the weather, the people, the vibe, everything was wonderful. Mm-hmm. And I also discovered that San Francisco was light years ahead of Chicago with HIV treatment and research and stuff like that. And so I visited in, I believe it was April, and by October of that year, I moved. And so it's the mid-90s. There's a big tech boom. Finding work was really easy. It wasn't a tough decision to move. I didn't have to do a lot. The hardest thing was finding housing, because, housing is always...
That's for everyone when they come. Yes. Yeah.
So that's how I got to San Francisco, and have not looked back since. I love it. California is a great state. It really takes care of its people for the most part. It's got challenges, and we know now that there's issues with drugs and homelessness and stuff, but it's a great place to be, and I'm really glad I made the move.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. And just so everybody knows, Peter's very healthy these days, and he's doing really well. So there's nothing that we need to be scared about for Peter.
Right. Yeah. Medical science has worked wonders. So
exactly.
I'm very happy.
So I wanted to share, and I know, and y'all, as we get into the show a little bit more, you may find that we have different remembrances of what happened over the years, and who's right and who's wrong about it all. But at any rate, I wanted to share with people a little bit about how we met. And I had moved to San Francisco. I'd been in San Francisco, I guess, for about 3 or 4 years. And I met the owner, the publisher of what's called Frontiers News Magazine, which is a gay and lesbian arts and entertainment news magazine, and asked me to become his advertising director. And I thought, in my mind, I sort of belittled that. I'm like, I'm a daily newspaper guy, corporate, for 24 years. What's this little newspaper you're talking about? So at any rate, it turned out that it was sort of what you would call it, Peter. It was sort of one of the two main magazine newsprint papers for the gay community.
The free weeklies that a lot of big cities have, like Chicago has The Reader, Village Voice in New York, The Stranger in Seattle, LA Weekly, SF,
Exactly. And it was Bay Area Reporter was sort of the newspaper in San Francisco, and Frontiers was more of the magazine layout. But at any rate, I became associate publisher at that point. And there was a grand opening of a bookstore that also sold videos and adult videos and all those types of things. And here I was, just new to California, new to San Francisco. My eyes were open all big and everything. And I felt like I was in a big candy store just walking around in the area. I'd never seen the things that I was seeing in San Francisco. But at any rate, there was a grand opening, and my editor said, you've got to go to this grand opening and get to know the people in the neighborhood. So I'm like, okay, I'll go. So I put on a black suit, and it was in the parking lot of a Walgreens, which the store that they opened was right in that area, in that little plaza. And so I thought that was a little strange that it was in a parking lot. But at any rate, they had a big tent and all those things. And I went in, and I'd been there for probably about 30 minutes hanging out with my employees and meeting people. And I turned to my editor, Alec, and I said, "Who is that guy with the fluffy blonde hair on the other side of the room?" And and the very first thing he said was, "Oh no, stay away from him." And he says, "No, that's not for you." And well, that was a challenge. So I thought, okay, well, when Alec turned and walked away, well, I thought, well, I'm just going to go meet that guy. So I walked over to Peter and I said, "Hi, my name is Brock. I'm the whatever associate publisher of Frontiers." And we started talking, and that's how we met. And 3 months later, we started dating, and 3 months later, we were driving around in the Dolores Park area of San Francisco, and we saw a man on a ladder putting a for rent sign up on a flat, a Victorian flat. And Peter said, "You want to go look at that?" Or I did, I don't remember. And we went and looked at it, and we ended up renting that house and moving in together. We'd known each other about 3 months, and so I don't know that I would always advise that for everyone, but it all worked out very well. And so that's how we met, and we started a life together. And as I said, we sort of broke up after 5 years. But during that time, and I'll let Peter talk about this, but we had not volatile, but we had a difficult relationship for about 3 or 4 years of that 5 years. And we were very different kind of people from different walks of life. But what I learned was my minister at the time, Ken Daigle, wanted to go to Unity Village to hear some woman named Martha Creek do a workshop. And he said, "Can the church pay for it? And will you go along with me?" And I said, "Okay." So we went, and I met Martha Creek. And if y'all know that name, you know she's a mighty, mighty force in the world. And she was teaching about how to have critical conversations and how to talk with your loved ones. And that weekend, I learned, okay, this is great. It was wonderful that I went, because now I know how to communicate with Peter, that it's all a positive, for the most part, way. So at any rate, when I got back, Peter picked me up at the airport, and I really wanted a sweet tea from McDonald's on the way home, and he didn't want to stop. And I used those principles that I learned from Martha, and I said, "Well, I can understand that. I can understand why you don't want to stop. It's really late." And then he ended up stopping anyway. And through all of that, through my own growth and learning how to talk with Peter, and then just us being around each other and being friends, we learned a new way of communicating and being with one another. And now we're companions. We live together. We moved back in during COVID with each other, and we help each other out. So I'm going to shut up now, Peter, because it's not about me today. But do you have a different story, or is that pretty similar to what you're thinking?
No, it's pretty similar. I, for what it's worth, I have no shame about this. I was working for the publishing company that had the adult bookstore and had the opening. And so I was like working one side of the street, and you were working the other side of the street. Mm-hmm. But I remember that. I remember meeting you. I remember getting a phone call a day or two later from Alec saying, if he asked you out, would you go, kind of a thing. But yeah, I would, and I'll even say, I think that I would not recommend moving in at 3 months with people. I will say this. I think one of the things that really impressed me, I remember you were already in Unity. You were already working with Unity at the time. I believe I'm recalling Maureen was the minister at the time. Is that the name?
She was. Uh-huh.
I remember that you had this very power of positive thinking vibe about you. And we'd go out, and I'm like, "Oh, let's not drive. We're never going to find parking there. We're never going to do that. And, let's take a cab." And you'd be like, "Oh, no, we'll find parking. We'll just believe the parking is going to be there, and we'll get it." And it would happen so often. The first time it's like, that's kind of a coincidence. Wow. But I remember thinking that was a very, very appealing thing for me about you when we met, is that you had a way of being able to manifest things, at least, it may seem like really trivial things, like what we want for dinner, or, what's going to happen. But it was impressive because it kept happening over and over. And so that's why I remember when we looked at that apartment, I was thinking, this seems so soon. This seems really soon. But it all seemed part of that driving down the street, because we had talked once or twice about what kind of neighborhood we want to live in, what this, what that, if we were to. And then we passed this guy, and he liked us and we liked him, and boom, boom. It was just like, well, it fit like a glove. So I thought, let's take the ride. Let's hop on. But yeah, I think that a lot of our challenges when we were, an intimate couple in a relationship was that we were very different people, and we still had a lot to learn about each other and about how, because at the beginning you're in that new relationship energy and you're trying really hard to put your best foot forward all the time. And then after a year or two, you're like, this is me. This is what you get. This is what you signed up
like,
for.
Whoa, what did I get into?
Yeah. So I remember that. I don't remember the timing of Martha and all that. But yeah,
that was 2014 when we went to Unity Village, Ken and I.
Oh, see, well, we moved in. I mean, it was 1999, 2000, I think, maybe the year 2000.
It was 1999.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but I would say that the other reason why we were able to finally maintain a friendship and stay close and connected, very familial, is because of your ex, Bob. And you and Bob stayed close and connected. And this was very weird to me. I remember we were out one night and you said, oh, and Bob's going to meet us. And I'm like, you invited your ex to meet me? And I saw that you guys were able to do that. And, to be perfectly honest, I don't want to tell tales on Bob, but now I had someone I could complain to who understood, who'd walked that walk already. So
it's true. Y'all teamed up against me a lot, but that's true. Bob, I'll have to say, if Bob was watching, he is the greatest man I have ever met in my life. And not that you're a good person, Peter, you are, but Bob truly had that presence of goodness about him every single time I ever met him, even before we became boyfriends. But Bob and I were together for 8 years. It was a wonderful relationship. And then decided to move out here to San Francisco. And that's the things that happened with that. And Bob is still very, very, very important in my life. And so I remember the night that I said, if you want to be with me, to Peter, then you're going to have to get to know Bob as well, because he's very important in my life. And Peter found that to be very strange. And then once they met, they became the two companions that always went out and shopped and went to grocery stores and cooked and all those things together.
Well, we like going to bars together. You didn't like
Yes,
that much.
I didn't like that. So, and then Bob eventually, about 4 years later, met someone named Andy and became partners with him, and they moved to Fort Lauderdale. And so we miss him a lot. But Bob was a very important part of mine and Peter's life together.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
and that's the same with me and Peter now. Is during COVID, I was living over in Vallejo and had moved over there prior to COVID happening. And things slowed down. We weren't going to work and all those types of things. And Peter said, why don't you move back in and help me with the doggies, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes as well. And we decided to do that. And now we made an agreement for 1 year that we would help each other. And it's been, I think, Peter, 4 years now that we're still doing that. And I help him with the dogs, and he helps me with my sermons, y'all. I write my sermons, my messages, my workshops, and I'll give them to Peter, and he makes me sound so much better. And he's a great editor. But we do get along, and it's difficult. Sometimes people ask us, are y'all partners? Are y'all lovers? Or what? I'm like, no, we're companions. And they're like, well, what does that mean? So, but it's nice to have someone to be a part of your life. And because that other part of my life is over with, I don't really care to have another partner again. And I'm very happy just being a companion with Peter. It works out really well for us, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it works out well. I again, we have different sort of recollections about how some things unfolded. We both, I'll try to be efficient with this. Publishing died by the early 2000s. And we both ultimately needed to find new careers and find things that were translatable. You had always been interested in real estate, so you became a realtor. I tried freelancing and things like that. But once you became a realtor, my recollection is, lived apart. You wanted to live apart. You wanted to be on your own. If I'm Oscar Madison, you're Felix Unger. Neither one is. I'm not as bad as Oscar, and you're not.
Oh
as
yeah,
bad as
you are.
Felix,
Okay.
but you wanted to be out, and so there were a couple times you moved out of the house or wherever it was we were living, and then circumstances would force you either to move back in or someplace just wasn't working out, and so we didn't always stay under the same roof once we broke up. And so we apart and back together and apart and back together. And the back together were always very platonic. They were like, all right, I've got the extra room still. I don't have a new roommate, so you can go live there. And yeah, so we sort of back and forth. Now, a lot of your listeners, watchers, your congregants, they know about the story where you lost your mother and your sister in really just a few months apart, and that was a really challenging time for you. And you had moved out to Vallejo by then. You were managing an office, real estate office, and all that. And it was clear that there was just too much going on, and there was too much grief for you to be dealing with when you lost both your mother and your sister. I think people who know your sister was probably the closest person to you in your entire life. You literally I would know, like, what was it, 10:45 or 11:45 or something every morning. It's like, oh, he's going to be on the phone with Beth. You were just,
it was 10 a.m. 10 a.m. every day.
Yeah. And so that's when it was like, things were really challenging for you. And it was like, this is not a time for you to be on your own. This is not a time for you to be isolated out in Vallejo, and work was suffering and all sorts of things. So it was like, look, I had always heard you talk about becoming a minister, having a congregation, having your own church, the kind of church you'd like to have. I from the time we were dating, it was always a thing, having grown up. And so my recollection is, by this point, I have my dog walking business. I have and it's going very well for me. It's doing very well. So I could keep the house in San Francisco and all that. And my thought was, you need to get better. Come and live in my house. I will take a lot of the stresses of rent and income and all that off of you. But I needed two, I don't know if you remember this. There were two things I wanted. I wanted, one, you got to work on yourself. You've got to, deal with your grief and face it. And whether it's talking to Martha or however you need to do this, you need to really process this, because it was really crippling you from my vantage point. And the other thing was, and help me with the dogs. I didn't need rent. I didn't need, help with food or anything like that. But I said, help me with the dogs, because it was a big business. And so that's what I remember. And then moving back out now to this house you see behind me, the house I bought in Vallejo and behind you, was during COVID. You had mentioned the pandemic. We knew that things were going to change. The dog business was really rocked by COVID because everyone was not working. And our landlord back in San Francisco, there were inklings that they were going to try to sell the house, and there were just things going wrong with the house. It was going to, and this and that. And I remember thinking, change is coming. I would rather be initiating the change. I'd rather be in charge of the change instead of just reacting to it. Like, oh my God, this happened now. What do I do? And so that's when I started looking, and you knew Vallejo. Vallejo was an affordable community for me and all that. And found this house, which was really nice. It's a 100-year-old house with 100-year-old bones that constantly need repairing. But so that's how I remember how this got out here. And and the working on yourself. So back to it was that's when you started going to Emerson, and you got ordained, and then you got your doctors and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
it all worked out.
Yeah,
it did work out pretty good. It did.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit, and y'all, Peter, as far as I've known him, has never been a real religious person, and I don't think that I'm religious either. But at any rate, in my mind, he was sort of way over here, and I was more here, as far as spirituality and religion went. And over the years, just us being together, I learned that he was a very spiritual person. He just looked at it and called it something different. So, Peter, will you talk to us a little bit about, share with us a little bit about your path to finding I guess, a spiritual philosophy, for lack of a better word to say it, of that you could get on board with that gave you some hope and faith about life?
Yeah. I definitely, you remember I said I was 6 of 7 children. So by the time you're like, all of my older siblings went through, catechism and confirmation and stuff like that. When I was a very, very like 4 or 5, there was some Sunday school things. But by the time I got old enough, my parents were not, they were over this you do this, you do that kind of thing with the kids. We were becoming a little more free range. And I always was a very scientific, analytical, kind of critical thinker. And so I largely an atheist growing up. In fact, I remember very clearly learning that there was no Santa Claus. And that in a family where we were raised on the Santa Claus mythology, and you've got older siblings, my parents were like, don't you tell your little brother, don't you tell your little brother. And it went from like this joyful Christmas thing to it's like, did you tell him you've ruined Christmas for him? You know, it was a very, what was supposed to be joyful got really sort of corrupted. And it felt almost humiliating, like a big hoax had been perpetrated rather, on me. When I learned there was no Santa Claus, there was no Easter Bunny, and it just immediately translated over to religion, to God and Jesus also. If all of these things, which seem so improbable, like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, oh, they're not true, it's a made-up story, why should any of this be believable also? And then I just, I like to think that in some areas I have an open mind. And as I got older, and I'm talking like into my 20s and 30s now, I just began to think an atheist who is absolutely determined to say there is no God, there is no heaven, it all ends the moment you die, it's all an accident, all this sort of stuff. To me, that's really no different than the super hardcore evangelical who were like, you must accept Jesus in your heart. And if you weren't baptized in this church that way, you're not going. To me, it's like the same argument, just from two different sides. Mm-hmm. And that began to open up the concept for me of that, maybe there is just more. There are things we still can't explain. And so maybe there's just more and bigger. And for the longest time, my thoughts were, and you've heard me say things like this before, as human beings, we are still animals on this planet. We're a product, in my opinion, of evolution, the same way dogs and monkeys and trees and everything else are. Maybe the concept of heaven or God or the great spirit beyond, whatever it is, maybe we're just not designed to really understand that. Maybe that's such a difficult comprehension to like look into the face of God or look into the heavens. Maybe we don't need to sweat it. Maybe we just live our life and let God do his stuff and we'll do ours and, see how it goes. And that was sort of cracking the door open to just thinking it's possible that there's more. It's possible that there's bigger and other. And there are times, in fact, we had mentioned Bob. I remember we were at a dinner at Bob's house with our friend Ken Broussard, and Andy was there. And we got on into a big conversation, sort of like this. And all of us had what might be considered non-traditional spiritual beliefs in terms of there is one God and he's a man with a big white beard sitting on a throne and he had one son, Jesus, and all that. We all were sort of like, no, life isn't quite like that, but there's forces at play, there's things that happen. And I just became really fascinated with this notion that it's there. And I don't know how much we ever really get to comprehend it while we're on this planet. But what I really liked with Unity, which is my first introduction, because you were much more steeped in Unity as opposed to now the New Thought Network and all, is Unity allows all of the, not just like religious spiritual text, but science and religion can coexist together in Unity, and great works of art and great works of philosophy, and it evolves as we learn more, and I thought that's pretty amazing, that because normally it's science and religion have to stay, like religion has a restraining order against science. They have to stay like 100 feet apart from each other.
True. Let me stop you right there for just a minute, Peter. We're going to have to take a break for about 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But very, very interesting conversation. And I want to pick up on that when we get back from the break. But at any rate, if you don't mind, take us out to a break, and everyone stay with us. Stay tuned to New Thought Media Network and Spiritual Toolkit. We'll be right back in about 2 to 3 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, from the break. We're here with Peter Millar, my guest today on Spiritual Toolkit at New Thought Media Network. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back, Peter.
Thank you. Let me put the clouds back in there. Hold on. There we go.
There you go. Well, since you're doing that, that sort of prompts the next question I wanted to ask is, when I met Robert Brzezinski a couple of years ago at the Anton Affiliated New Thought Network conference at Unity Village, he had this idea about putting together a network to help ministers and lay people and practitioners get their message out there. And several of my friends were signing up to do that. And so I went and talked with him and said, I want a show. I've got a lot to talk about. So he said, let's do it. So at any rate, when that happened, he says, you're going to need a producer. And I'm like, well, okay, I don't know anything about any of that. What do we do? And I went to Peter, and because he had a film background in college and things of that nature, and also because he helps me with my work in editing, I said, hey, do you think you can do this? And the idea that I had in my head, sort of a vision came to me, and I can't think of the name at the moment. Was it Howard Stern, Peter, and his
Howard
producer?
Stern and Robin Givens. Yeah.
Robin, that's it. So I sort of had this idea that Peter could be my Robin, and I would be the Howard Stern for my show. And I asked him, and he said he would love to do it. And I put him in touch with Robert, the founder of New Thought Media Network, and they trained him how to do it. And tell us a little bit about that. And are you enjoying it? And how's this working for you?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. It is, as you probably remember from way back at the Frontiers days and all that, what I found a skill for me was what I called a content producer. Mm-hmm. Which meant that, like, when I was managing editor at Frontiers with you, I loved the meetings where we figure out, like, are we going to be themed for this week's issue? What can we do? What's the point of view? You know, this person would probably make a really great interview or a great article and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so as far as producing, I do have a little bit of understanding how some people produce things like podcasts or radio shows or whatever. And, you know, there's a certain amount of meeting the people beforehand and finding out what they want to talk about, if there's special things they want to promote, and kind of listening to figure out what's really interesting about their stuff. I found your interview with Francine and the writer fascinating, and it was great to hear her talk about it. And then sort of, that was one of the shows where I chimed in with a couple questions because I thought there's a lot of richness here that we can talk about. So I like that. And I actually, as you know, and I'm sure people watching this know, the pandemic really changed the way people experience a lot of their social interactions and a lot of their spiritual interactions, like church going. And it things went online, and we know at work, you know, people still want to work remotely and do Zoom meetings and all that. And so as a minister, it also seemed smart that you would begin to create an online presence. It just seemed like a logical step. And I actually have, you know, big ideas that I hope we can do more of. As you know, and we've talked a little bit about this, there's a lot of great shows here on the New Thought Media Network, and I encourage people to check them all out and see what's a good fit for you. But if you noticed in the commercial we just showed, there's a special event concert where two musical artists are going to be coming together for a one night show. And I thought, wow, that right now we've got a lot of people with weekly programs or bi-weekly programs or whatever, you know. And what if we were to start creating things that were a mini series or a one shot or just a two-part episode, you know? Because that's one of the great things about this format online is that it's less restrictive than things like a television schedule or a radio broadcast schedule.
True.
And we have flexibility. So this is like what, your 10th or 11th show now? I've lost count.
I think it's my 10th. I'm not quite sure.
And I finally feel like I'm getting the hang of it. it's there's a lot of little buttons to push to make sure things go or don't go or noise doesn't come through. And that I'm still, learning a few of those things here. I forgot that. Like the black, forgetting the clouds, things like that. But for the most part, it's coming together pretty well. It's fun.
Actually, I think you're doing a very good job. And basically, not just with New Thought Media Network and Spiritual Toolkit, but with everything that I do with my work, including real estate, I have ideas. I like to stay up about an hour later than Peter. So I try to rush him and the dogs to bed so I can have some quiet time alone in my bedroom. And things come to me during that time. But I had the idea of, how do we truly help people with this show? How do we show what our heart is? And Peter helps me with that, because he understands what my ideas are, and he even takes them further than what my idea was. And then he's the one that puts it all together. So I'll go, okay, I've got this idea. How can you go make this happen for us? And he's that technical guy behind the scenes, and whether he's technical or not, he figures it out. And because of that, we work really, really well together. And that's why we stay together, as with this show, with my ministry, and then helping him with the dogs and things of that nature as well. But he's very smart. He's much smarter than me, y'all. And he makes me look better with everything I do. So thank you. But what I wanted to do, we only have a few minutes left, Peter. So if you don't mind, why don't you scroll some of the pictures that you've got? I saw you looking pictures up. I didn't see them all.
Yeah.
But some of your life and some of your doggies and things of that nature. And let's just show a few of those pictures, and we could talk about those a little bit. We've got about 6 minutes left, y'all.
Yeah. We've got actually a couple more than so. But let me say one thing real fast, if I may.
Sure.
As we were talking about spirituality and my lack of a formal spiritual philosophy, but how I've evolved, what I always come back to when people hear what I'm doing with you, and they're like, you're helping some guy write sermons and stuff, is I heard this thing, and this just is absolutely perfect to me, and I think it has a lot of new thought in it. And that is that, according to certain laws of physics, that I'm a science guy, I accept the laws of physics, laws of thermodynamics and whatnot. We know that matter and energy are never lost in the universe. They're just, you don't run out of energy, it's just converted into matter. And the same thing with matter, it's energy, and it's this constant recycling through. And that means that from the Big Bang, from the thing that created everything, we are that material. You, me, everything around us. Mm-hmm. And that I can get on board and say, gosh, that's right. That means so I am a part of this universe, literally. Mm-hmm. And I've sailed across the oceans of the cosmos. And here, and that thought gives me such a sense of connection to something bigger and farther and beyond. And I love that, one, as I said, New Thought allows that sort of science and evolution and all that to inform the beliefs. But it also, how am I going to say this? It makes it very easy for me to have the science part, and to say I can. Oh, and here's the other thing is that I know people who are much more skeptical than I am, and are atheists and all that, and they talk about figuring out what happened before the Big Bang, and like, well, because some people will say, well, God had to create the Big Bang, at least something had to happen. So how, if there was a divine entity or energy that created even the Big Bang, it still means we are a product of something divine. Whether you just see us as the very scientific pieces of the universe from its very origin, or it was divinely created, we're still that. It does not minimize, neither interpretation minimizes our presence and our connection to the universe. And that was And so that, this spiritual toolkit, that's something I go back to when I'm like, that still is true. And that's, if my faith is being shook about something, I can still go back to my science and still take comfort in its own way. It's a unique thing. But
and with New Thought and Unity and religious science as well, it's all included. It's all included. And we say it in the sense of we are all one with God, one with the universe. We are God expressing living organisms, expressing breathing, smelling, feeling, all those things of God. So it's the oneness, Peter. And that's sort of what we say, is that we're one with the universe. We're one with God. We have every single right to be here.
Yes. And my thought is that being raised as a skeptic, kind of the way I was young, sometimes I hear God or Jesus, phrases like that, and I'm a little, that's a little dogmatic for me. I'm not sure that, but because in New Thought, we are one with it all. We can find language that is truthful and expresses everything without having to bring up other challenging beliefs that may not, coincide with this.
True.
But you had go ahead.
I found back in my earlier days, when I was growing up Southern Baptist, that there had to be more. I remember as a child thinking there just had to be more. Yeah. And when we went to our first Unity church, my mother started dating the Unity ministers, how all that happened. And I would think I was 14 years old. We went to Unity. And when I heard that we are all one, it really affected me. And it meant that I was okay. It was okay because even at 14, I knew that I looked at other guys and I shouldn't be looking at other guys. Yeah. And I didn't totally understand it like you as well. But it's okay. We were born. We have every right to be here. And we're here uniquely us so that we can learn from one another and take those steps to transcend just this world so that we live more in that spiritual ethical living that I like to talk about. But yes, I wanted you to show some pictures, if you will, of your doggies and all that stuff that you do as well.
Sure. So as you had mentioned, one of the things we did as a couple was we raised a Chesapeake Bay Retriever together. That's her.
That's my baby.
Yeah. That's still a very iconic photograph for me. But so in 2015, as you know, I had some job things changing and shifting, and I knew someone who was a dog walker and asked if I'd be interested in working with him. And so I became a dog walker. And this is me a couple years ago with the dogs in Stern Grove. There's me. There they are in the back of my truck, picking them up. Sadly now, I believe only the Weimaraner over there on the left is the only surviving dog. Oh, Frankie's there. Frankie's still there.
Yeah. I see him.
And this is in the house, when we're lucky and we can get them out for their proper exercising. The secret of this job is that dogs do a lot of the work themselves. If they're good socialized dogs, you can't just take in any dog. But if a dog is socialized, it wants to be a part of the pack. It wants to know where it fits. And it doesn't want the chaos and the insanity, which there is a lot of barking. We're lucky on this live stream today that no one's rang the doorbell or walked by the front door with a cat,
It's true.
And just to give your viewers a sense of what it can be like during the holidays when there's a lot of boarding, here is a picture of all the bowls of food that we were preparing for dinner. This was back in the old house in San Francisco. I mean, there's so many, and everyone, we have to have little labels, what all's what, and who's who, and different meds and stuff. But yeah, it's been really fun. I will tell people that it's the only job I've ever had where everyone is happy to see me when I show up. I've never had a job where everyone was excited that you came to work today. That's great. Yay.
Right.
So it's pretty awesome that way.
It is.
I like
I
it.
love the doggies also. And there are times when I'm trying to write that I get a little irritated, and I'll go downstairs and say, Peter, please keep these dogs quiet, shut the door, do something. But when they all show up in my bedroom, they're all on the bed with me. I love them, and they're wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's a great business that Peter has that
we're
I get
both
to
dog
enjoy as
people.
well.
Yeah, we're both dog people. We have a great affinity for dogs, and it works. So it's nice. And it's when you find something, as someone who went to Northwestern University and spent way too much money on a higher education, to find myself walking dogs this day, after studying filmmaking and having dreams of going to Hollywood and all that, it really is true. If you enjoy what you're doing and you're good at it, that's the reward. It doesn't, and if you're doing something you're passionate about, you can find ways almost always to monetize it so you can make a living at it.
Exactly.
So,
well, thank you very much, Peter. It looks like we've come to the end of our show just about. Will you come back again in a couple of months, and perhaps we'll go deeper on some other things that we didn't talk about today?
Yeah. And, like we said, maybe I'll be a little bit more like Robin Givens in the future and pop in a little bit more. I know that not everyone always wants me popping in when they interview, but it's fun. The interview with Robert Brzezinski last week was amazing. I encourage people to go to your YouTube page and find it. But
true. Thank you for that. And it was. And thank you very much for everyone for joining us today. We've come to the end of the show. Peter, I'm grateful for your participation and sharing such interesting, thought-provoking, and didn't tell too much about me information. And thank you to all of our viewers and subscribers for joining us today. And join us next week when I have Reverend Sherry Johnson, a very, very dear friend of mine. She's also a part of Anton as a member. She's a CSL minister. She lives in the Kansas City area near Unity Village, actually. And so she'll be my guest next week. And then don't forget to check out all the other wonderful shows here on New Thought Media Network at ntmedia.org. And make sure you come back next Thursday at 3 p.m. to watch Spiritual Toolkit. That's it. I love everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night. Blessings to you all.
Goodbye.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.